Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HTML All the Things podcast, episode number 14, Communicating with Customers. I'm your host, Matt Lawrence, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Mike Curran. What have you been up to this week, Mike?
Yeah, hey, Matt. So this week, I've been looking at a little bit of server infrastructure stuff for us. Looking at DigitalOcean to be hosting our server side, possibly both sides. Don't know yet about that, but been looking at that, and then some Docker stuff, because DigitalOcean has a cool thing where you can create a Docker container, which is like a self-sufficient server-side kind of applet on your own computer. And then all you have to do is kind of click upload and then copy everything over to DigitalOcean. And you don't have to do any sort of maintenance and any sort of setup on there. You can just kind of set everything up on your own computer locally and then just, click upload to DigitalOcean and everything kind of works. So I've been looking a lot into that, and then I've been doing a little bit of work on the filters for the HAT site, or the navigation for the HAT site. So that's coming along. Other than that, just work as usual. So what about you, Matt?
So same kind of thing with in terms of the HAT site. So not the server infrastructure, but I have been working on it. I've been doing the UI here and there right now. So basically, to kind of break it down a little bit, basically what there is there's the what we call the hub. So the hub is sort of where you see all the posts, like in a big like list. So sort of like your reading list or something like that, or your homepage maybe on Medium, that type of thing, to kind of bring reference in. But so basically, like that's more or less done. The hub is more or less done. You're working on the filters, and then obviously the actual articles will lead to full article pages. So I am working on those full article pages because the design has changed. I think we've mentioned this in the past, but the design has changed from the original design, which they were all going to be the same cover photo with like your basic meta, like, your title, your date, your whatever else. And then there was going to be, your written material. Now there's like a little bit different because we have different things like templates and that type of thing. And Webflow, we needed them to all the pages to be the same or very close to being the same. This time we don't, like we're able to change it. So some of the pages are going to be more like I guess like almost like an app marketplace kind of thing, like a little bit. So there's gonna be like a gallery and that type of stuff. So I've been kind of like messing around with that kind of thing in Vue, and I've basically finished the blog one. So that's like the first type. That's the most basic type, and then that's because it's the most basic. That's gonna be my template for different for the other full post things. However, one thing I guess we should mention, or one thing I guess I can mention, is that it's interesting in Vue because we had a discussion in person where we decided to do everything in components. So like obviously we're doing a lot of stuff in components, but we've actually decided to have each of these types of posts in different components. And it's interesting because like I'm making a UI in piecemeal, and I'm starting to kind of understand what you're doing because you're doing all the back end stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it's like interesting because I'm like, okay, he's pulling this, he's pulling that. It's not like a traditional web page where it's like, okay, I need, blog.html, and I'll pull from an SQL database into the text field, and then the text will populate with the new text. It's not like that. It's totally different. It's like a completely different experience. So it's like super interesting. We're learning a new framework. I'm learning a new infrastructure. So I don't know. It's just something super kind of interesting. Every time I go in, like I never get as much work done on it as I think I'm going to, because I find something and I like find like a string and I start pulling at it because I start reading about it. But I mean, that's good because going down the road, we'll be able to actually do better with it and actually upgrade the site. Because I have a couple of iterations thought up as well, like kind of just theoretical at the moment, obviously, because the site doesn't exist. But one other thing to mention too is if I sound different, it's because I now have my boom arm and pop filter. So no longer on the blue little desktop stand thing. I am now on a proper boom arm and pop filter, and I'm right up to the mic. I project my voice as a kind way of saying I yell and I'm loud. So put a pop filter on this thing, and now that I can actually be right up to the mic, Mike himself said that he can actually hear me better even on the Skype call, which is obviously like compressed audio. So that's good news, and hopefully it will. Actually, I'm watching the wave live here, and I'm not being like half as loud in terms of the wave as I was before. So that's good news, because my peas would definitely pop without this thing. But moving on, I think our listeners want to hear actual like synopsis of the show. So obviously communicating with customers, we're going to be covering a whole bunch of stuff such as how communication can be difficult, especially when dealing with new customers. Customers are people too, though, so that's like something you really need to keep in mind. And they like to communicate in different ways, just like how our friends will with different chatting apps or different types of calls, or maybe they don't like calling, etc., etc. So certain tips and tricks can really make your communication efficient and easy to follow. And as always, I'm going to go through the segments before we dive in. So segment number 1 is establishing channels. Segment number 2 is different types of communicators. And segment number 3, the do's and don'ts. And then, of course, our recurring segment, web news, which is social overload. Overload always seems to be noun plus, I guess, overload always seems to be one of the topics, but it's definitely a conversation starter, and it's definitely something on a lot of people's minds. So stay tuned for that. But let's dive in right to the first segment here, establishing channels. So establishing channels can be critical. And what I mean by establishing channels is specifically with how to get contacted. So with so many ways to get for your customers to contact you in various apps, they can contact you in apps, they can contact you in emails. It's very important that you make it clear which channels your new customer should contact you on, so that you don't miss messages. So if you think that if customers think that they can, maybe they find your Instagram and they think, hey, I'm going to go and DM this guy on Instagram, but let's say you never check your Instagram DMs, you might be losing on a potential business. Same goes with everything else. Most apps have some sort of contact section, some sort of chatting section, some sort of messaging section, and so you can miss out on things like rather frequently. So existing customers will sometimes suddenly change your communication channels without warning, though. So this is one thing where, let's say you've been working with a person, so this isn't for the new guy, but let's say you've been working with a person for a few months, and the whole time, like, they haven't said anything, but the whole time, their primary chatting app is Skype. And so they've just so happened to find you on Skype, and they just start messaging you on there, but you don't check your Skype frequently, or you don't check for them. You're just not paying attention to Skype. And so that might result in missed messages. So it's really important that you firmly establish which methods you actively use, and do that publicly so that they know which ones to stay away from. So like one way to do that is obviously to literally just tell them, like, hey, I'm going to talk to you via email, whatever. I'm going to talk to you via like messaging, or if let's say they do a Skype message without warning, you literally just say, like, hey, dude, like, I don't check my Skype often, so if you wouldn't mind just keeping it into whatever channel we were in, SMS or email or whatever, that'd be great. And people generally will understand. Sometimes they'll press, and you can kind of make a decision based on that, but just make it clear that you're only wanting to use these communication channels so that you don't miss their messages, and that's like a benefit to them, and more or less they will be willing to actually bend to what you wanted to do there. Sometimes customers will want to migrate to different channels, or a hybrid of a couple after working with you for a while. And generally we will actually do this if it makes it easier for the customer. So for example, we have a customer where we've been working with them quite frequently, and it got to the point where this customer is rather hands-on, and there's a lot of emails exchanged, which is fine. We're on a big email thread, and there's a couple email threads going on for different topics, which is totally fine. But one of the things is that email really isn't an instant messenger, and we started getting to the point where it was like 2 or 3 word emails, like change the title, or let's change to Arial font type, or stuff like that, really off the cuff comments. And so we slowly started moving to SMS. So we have SMS for those things, and then I will write sort of more formal reports / emails in an actual email on these various threads that we have open. But just, it's something that we're more flexible on, and obviously the customer is more comfortable with, because he likes to just sort of like fire off a couple of different features that he'd like to maybe touch on, or like maybe it's a concept, or maybe he'd like something, just directly change. Like I said, the font type is self-explanatory, but he'd like to just send those off whenever. And then whenever I, go to work on the site, I will check my SMS from him, and then I'll check the email from him as well. And then I'll just sort of, prioritize and go through as I can, ask questions as I need to. But it's easier for him, it's easier for us as a result of that. So just something to keep in mind. Establishing your channels is is actually like rather easy to do. Like it's not something that you need to like be like super set in stone. So basically what you basically have to do is you have to clearly state them when asked in a meeting. So, or like listing them in a contact page, or clearly defining them on a bio or profile on social media. So just a few examples. So, on your site, if you have like a website that, you're directing customers to you, like, if you just want email, just do email. If you want sort of the more anonymous email, which is, kind of frowned upon by some folks, but like just having an email form, some people don't like that. But if you want to do that, then, then do that. And then that directs people to that. Don't like, mention SMS. Don't necessarily mention a phone number unless you potentially want to get called or texted. Like just, naturally direct people to where you want them to contact you, because they're going to go generally to the path of least resistance. And then on social, of course, people put emails in their Instagram bios. People put like little notes in there like, hey, make sure you do this before retweeting us. Hey, make sure you do this before reposting us, stuff like that. And you can be clear with stuff. If you're really, really against Twitter DMs, or if you're really, really against Instagram DMs, you can literally say, hey, I don't check Twitter DMs on this account. Please direct all things to my business inquiry email. Something like that. You can do that. Now, one thing though is, because there's so many ways to communicate with somebody, and it's so fast nowadays, there's a rather large chance that a lot of people won't actually even read those things. So those things are how you direct people to the different channels. But what happens if the people don't read the directions as people do? Well, the one thing you should really do then is, keep in mind what accounts you have that have messaging and that type of thing, and maybe check them once a week, or more or less, depending on how urgent you think things are. But make sure you just go through them. And this especially goes for your spam filter, or spam folder rather, on your email, because we've had problems where people have sent us a bunch of emails in a row with like a bunch of content, which we told them to send, but the spam filter would be like, hey, this guy sent you like 8 emails in 5 minutes, and there's a bunch of attachments. I'm marking this contact as spam. And so we don't see anything for weeks, and then it's a big problem. So what we've started doing is checking our spam boxes at least once a week. Make sure, hey, like, yeah, sure, maybe something's a week late now, but at least it's not 4 months late. And, we can just tell the guy like, oh, hey, sorry, it went into my spam box, and you can keep moving on. Also, new business opportunities could possibly come through the spam box. There's obviously going to be a ton of spam in there, so be careful when you're in there. But, make sure you check your Twitter DMs, your spam filters, or your spam folders, and your Instagram DMs and all that type of stuff, just to make sure that you're catching everything. And make sure that when you're in those channels, if someone's, Twitter DMing you and you'd like to, maybe specifically use email, you can absolutely tell those people, hey, I want to move this conversation to email if that's okay. I don't really use Twitter DMs. Is it okay if you email me here? And most people are happy to oblige. Yesterday, I had something similar on Instagram where somebody was trying to send something over Instagram DM, and it just wasn't working. So I was like, hey, let's just move this to email. It's a little bit more of a traditional communication type, and let's get the ball rolling that way, just so we don't waste any more time. So just some communication channels to keep in mind. I don't know if you have any other comments on that one, Mike.
You know what? You covered that pretty well. I don't really have any other comments, but I have a story about communication that I'd like to tell. We had that one time where we like we've told a couple times, we have a couple Chrome apps. One of those Chrome apps has multiple accounts for Outlook.com.
Right.
And one time I just was randomly eating dinner and I got a call from Texas, and I was like, who's calling me from Texas? I have a client in the States, but I didn't, so I decided to pick it up just in case it was them. And it turned out to be a woman, and she was using multiple accounts for Outlook.com and had an issue where none of her accounts were showing up. So it was a random thing. I guess my phone number was in there somewhere as a support number for our accounts, but what ended up happening was they just had an issue with an internet connection, and I helped them troubleshoot it, and they were happy and along their way. But I think the point of the story that I want to make is that not all of your communications are going to be kind of set up by you or by your intention of how people are going to use them. And sometimes you just got to roll with the punches. Sometimes you're going to have to break your own rules, go with it. And if you pick up the phone and it's a customer calling, even if it's a small issue like that, maybe help them out anyway, because who knows, in the future that might, generate some more goodwill towards your company. But yeah, that was a really weird and interesting situation that happened, and I had to kind of use my IT skills to figure out what was going on. But thankfully, it wasn't any problem with our app. It was just their home internet connection. But yeah, other than that, I think we can move on.
I don't know if you want to take away for that first part of that segment, Mike.
Sure, yeah. Let me take over a couple of these. So segment 2, different types of communicators. So as you work with clients, you will start to understand how they work. So, but more importantly, how they communicate and what they generally expect. So people are different. That's pretty much what that means. So like if one client really likes email, that doesn't mean that you can use that template for every single client that you have. We have multiple examples of people only wanting to use phone, only wanting to use email, only wanting to use text messaging. It's just one of those things. And then you're also going to get some clients that are entirely hands off. And then that's more like they just give you the assignment and then they step away and they do their own thing. Because a lot of clients, especially in small business and small web, they have so much work that they've offloaded this on you, and they hope that they can continue their work because it's not directly tied to the website while you do all the brunt of the work. So it's interesting because sometimes you have these situations where you want the client to stop communicating with you, and then the other flip side is you need to ask questions of the client and they're not responding back. So it's an interest, and this happens probably like most, I don't know, 50-50 I would say with our clients. So sometimes they're just like constantly talking to us about needless things that really don't matter. And then sometimes they'll just go away, and then they we'll need some content from them. Like, oh, can you write a couple of points about the about so that we can put an About Us page up, and we won't hear back from them for a month, and there's not much you can really do. The general tips and tricks of that would be just to be consistent with your communication. Don't be overly aggressive. Don't call them 15 times a day to try to get them, because that they're not responding to you because A, they just don't have time for that, or B, they just they're not in the mindset. Sometimes it's a really big mindset thing for them, where they're like, I can't deal with the website right now because I need to focus my efforts and my thought process on this, and I don't even want to talk to them. So that can happen too. So don't overly bombard them, but give a quick reminder, maybe like if it's a very urgent thing, at most once a day, but then maybe keep it down to even a couple times a week or once a week if you can afford to drag on that process a little bit longer if you have other clients to focus on. So then another thing is that there's no clear-cut way to determine which type of communicator your client is, other than working with them and slowly learning their expectations. So just as you would with a friend, we all contact different friends in different ways depending on how we've communicated with them in the past, and that's the same thing with clients. So it's really like a give and take. So once you start working with a client, they can also evolve as well. So you start working with them, all of a sudden they're only phone, and you talk to them over the phone, and that's it, and they don't even want to answer your emails. Like you email them, they'll call you to talk about the email that you just sent. That's happened many times. But then all of a sudden, as you build that trust in a relationship, they'll start changing their ways of contacting you. So they'll start answering your emails, maybe just moving on to text, and it depends on what's going on with their life, and you got to adapt to that. So you have to make sure that you can kind of go with the flow, but also keep in mind that it's your life as well, and you want to set some limitations. Like if they want to all of a sudden use some obscure messaging app that you don't have installed, and you're very against it for whatever reason that is, maybe you have a clear-cut divide, being like, listen, I don't have that application, this is my reasons for not having it, can we move on to give them a choice of 3 different ways to contact you. I think that's a fair way to do it. But anyway, be flexible with the people and learn their communication patterns as you go. I don't know, Matt, do you have anything to add to those 3 points? I know there's a few more points here. I don't know if you want to take over.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the things I'd like to add to that is that we don't be so strict, I think, to say I'm not going to necessarily download a specific app. But Mike is right in saying that when it's your life, if you have, I have 9 or something like that chatting apps on my phone, I'm not downloading another one. It's just not going to happen at this point unless one of them gets decommissioned. If I stop using Slack and start using something else, that's a totally different story. But people always say oh man, have less apps and less stuff signed in so your battery life is good. I got some friggin' news for you. I got some pretty bad battery life on my Samsung, and I got a lot of freaking apps, and they're all used by one person. So definitely there's I'm open clearly to trying different apps, but like sometimes it's just like, okay, I don't want to do this. Like there's too many apps now. There's too many apps. So I mean, we've done app overload, but not to dwell on that, but just something to keep in mind is be open, but sometimes you got to be firm. I guess to move on from like kind of apps and that type of thing, it's the fact that some people are more face to face oriented, and they'll want more in-person meetings rather than emails or messaging. And while others just want like a quick message or emails, especially long form ones, they're too cumbersome for them. So what I mean by that is some people are really like fast, like they themselves are entrepreneurs. They're the guys that are really, really quick, and they talk really fast, and they go. Those guys generally will want real quick calls, real quick emails, real quick SMS. Like it's a hybrid, but they don't want long reports, long form conversation, long form whatever. Generally, right? Some of them do. Sometimes it's needed, so they'll do it. But generally speaking, they'll want quick, off the cuff, put this background in black, make this text red, make this real easy, real quick, whatever. See, like Mike said, you got to kind of roll with the punches there. But one thing I do want to mention is that if people want more face-to-face, you have to do face-to-face meetings sometimes, especially if the person is local, or maybe you have to travel for work, and that's absolutely fine. But sometimes people want a face-to-face meeting when it's absolutely, and I mean absolutely unnecessary. And sometimes what you need to do is you kind of have to either just say no, or you have to meet them in the middle ground and say, okay, I know you don't like Skype, but let's do like Skype with a webcam. Let's just do Skype. Like, let's just do Skype. I don't have time. And, try to accommodate them at the same time that you are changing or like not really necessarily abiding by what they said. Because sometimes people will be like, oh, drive on down to my house and come on in and we'll have a 15-minute conversation about how this background should have been 3 font sizes bigger, and then you can leave. So it's like, good. So now I drove there, used gas, technically maintenance on the car. Then I it took a bunch of time. Now I got to drive back. So it's like you're commuting. It's like I could have literally received like a couple of messages, we get a message back and forth, or like, 1 or 2 emails, or a call for 5 minutes, and then we could have moved on. So sometimes, like, it's at your discretion, obviously, but sometimes it is absolutely unnecessary, and sometimes you have to push back. But for those people, though, if things start to pile up, so one of the things that we did was, that we do with clients that like to meet in person is, that's fine, but we make things pile up. So we'll say to them, especially if we're doing a bunch of things for them, we'll be like, okay, let's leave that topic, because let's say we're struggling to discuss. Let's say they have 8 updates they want on a site, and let's say we do 6 of them, and 2 of them are big, and 2 of them are cumbersome. So while we're talking about all of them, we say, okay, let's work on these 6, and let's leave these 2 for an in-person meeting, and maybe we'll wait till there's 4 things, and then we'll go and we'll have an in-person meeting. And that way, it keeps them happy. They know you're willing to do what they want to do, and you're willing to go and meet them. And an in-person meeting has its, benefits, whatever, social contact and whatever. You're not cooped up at your desk. But at the same time, you are still having a lot of that desk time so that you can quickly kind of, bounce around different tasks, do those 6 tasks, maybe work on somebody else's stuff in between while you're waiting for something to upload, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you kind of have to be kind of fluent in that. So I think with that, one of the things we should mention is we have like a whole bunch of ways that we personally, there's a whole bunch of ways to communicate with customers, but we have a couple of main methods we'll use. So we use main methods with customers specifically is phone calls, Skype calls, which is obviously very similar, and messaging. So, we'll message you on Skype, or they'll message us on Skype, and they can send files and that type of thing. The benefit of Skype over a phone call is that you can share screen, which is great for those people that love the in-person meetings. Like it's great for them because they get to literally show you the screen, and you can be like, oh, I fixed that live. Sometimes, if you can. So, that's really great. SMS, obviously. So texting, that's a given. Like a lot of guys will find out, hey, like I know your mobile number now. I'll just text you this stuff, or I'll text you the address, or whatever, whatever you need to communicate with them, and they'll, you'll do it. And then email, of course. So email is sort of like our more official and my personal preferred method of contact in terms of more official stuff. Like I like to write, if I do a bunch of updates for somebody, I'll write not like a really lengthy report, but I'll be like, hey, these updates are now completed, and these are the ones I've done. I've done this, and this. This one's pending. This one I have a question about, that type of thing. So that's what I do via email. And now we have like a bit of a different procedure, I guess it would be called. It's business to business. So for business to business, we'll kind of use social media. And when I say business to business, I mean, so for example, for our Instagram page, for the HTML, all the things Instagram page, a lot of the time we'll be talking with people that we want to repost, and we'll be talking to them via the Instagram DM. And that's the easiest, quickest, best way to have it there. It's all sorted right there. I know where all my communications are. It's not like I have one guy on email, one guy here, one guy there, one guy here. But again, be fluent in that the one thing wasn't working via DMs, so we moved it to email. But generally speaking, all my Instagram communications are on Instagram. Facebook group messaging, or like, you know when you can go on like a Facebook page and you can kind of go in via Messenger, we'll check that. And usually that's business to business though, in our experience. Obviously customers can use that as well, but we don't prefer that. We definitely prefer, email or call or, maybe even a text, either way. And then obviously Twitter DMs. So Twitter DMs, same thing as the Instagram. We'll use Twitter DMs for just stuff on Twitter. Keep it organized, keep it, right there. When I open the Twitter app, I know what I'm doing. I'm in there for Twitter posts. I'm in there for posting on Twitter. I'm there for reading on Twitter, and I'm in there for getting messages or like sending and receiving messages on Twitter. So that, kind of keeps it together. But those three methods are for us mostly business to business, or at least professional to professional sort of communications. Rather with the other ones, they are mostly customer. Unless you have any more to add to that, Mike, I think you can take over for segment number 3 there.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll add to the Skype calls and messaging a little bit, and the screen sharing that you mentioned. I think that's a huge one, especially if your client is at all tech savvy. We do code reviews through screen sharing. We do, design tweaks through screen sharing. And I work with, like, one of the clients is in California. So without that screen sharing capability, I don't think I would be able to take that job, because most of our work is done through that. Even any sort of deployment, I'm kind of like a second pair of eyes when he does any deployments. I'm making sure that everything's going the right way. And vice versa. So we use screen sharing extremely heavily with especially our technical clients, but I'm assuming, Matt, you also use it for when you're just like showing a design here and there. So it's important. I think it's an important part, and it's important that it works well, because when it works terribly, then it's just like a disaster. And thankfully, Skype has been pretty decent lately with their new version, so I recommend them for screen sharing right now. I used to recommend Hangouts, but Hangouts has been pretty much abandoned for the most part, so they have some issues here and there as well. But yeah, other than that, I'll move on to segment number 3, which is
if I could just interrupt you,
don'ts.
actually.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, sorry about that. But I just wanted to say one thing that I think could be of value is with that screen sharing. It just popped in my head that I actually mostly use that for design and layout meetings. Mm-hmm. So one of the things is if you're using a program like Webflow for making the site, or if you're using, something where you've shared a wireframe, so you've like given them a PDF of the wireframe, and you have the wireframing program open, and they do a screen share with you. A lot of the times you can actually fix it on the fly, especially with Webflow. If it's something easy, you could fix it on the fly, and that really proves to people, especially the people that want to do an in-person meeting, they're like, wow, we just did it, like it's done. You didn't need to come here, talk about it. You go home, you schedule the change, do the change, message me, tell me it's done, I look at it, we review it. It's not like that. It's literally, hey, I wanted this changed, I did it, that's it. So, it depends on your software, but it's for those type of things, I find it extremely valuable. I just wanted to throw that in because I think that might be important for some people.
No, you're definitely right. And I think it's a good point where customers that I've noticed, like pretty much all the customers that we've had, really love it when you can do stuff on the fly like that. Like it's a tough thing to do sometimes, especially when it's a more technical question. But if it's a design tweak, like changing the color here and moving this over there, and you can do it on the fly, customers will think like that's the best thing ever. So it's a good skill to have, and I've been developing it as well. I've been coding on the fly a lot, like right inside of our meetings, and I find that the response I get from that is extremely positive. So at first I was very hesitant to start, because I knew that if I started, they would expect me to do that. But I've set very clear limitations where, like, I'll say, okay, this I'll do offline and I'll do on my own time because I need to focus and check some things. But I've noticed really like a good positive vibe from pretty much all of my customers that I've done that with. So interesting skill to kind of learn and practice with. So definitely a good call there, Matt. So I'll move on then. So segment 3, do's and don'ts. I'll start with the do's, and then they kind of like interact with the don'ts as well, obviously. So some of the do's that I've learned throughout my throughout our time here. So establish a time frame for a customer to contact you. So this can be different between customers, and it can also take into account time zones and stuff like that. So what I'm saying here is like, instead of having a time frame of any time the customer could contact you, like we have some customers that don't go to sleep until 3 a.m. in the morning. So and they'll contact you at 3 a.m. in the morning. If you start responding to that at 3 a.m. in the morning, they will start expecting your response immediately, or they'll start expecting your response at weird times where you're not usually up. So what's a good rule of thumb, and I read this in a book, and I can't remember what the book's name is right now, but what's a good rule of thumb is have a few set times during the day where you go and you check your emails and you respond. And even if the email comes in, as you're working and you see the email pop in like on your phone or on your desktop, don't go in and ruin your workflow just because of an email, because it'll throw off your customer in the fact that they'll expect that from you. So they'll expect you to go in and reply right away if you keep doing that. And then as soon as you don't, you'll have a negative feedback because they were expecting it and they didn't get it. So but as long as you set up your time frame to be convenient to their schedule. So let's say they have, they usually send a response at the end of the day, and you send them a response at the beginning of your day. That's a completely appropriate and a completely efficient way of responding to the customer. Whereas having it always come and then responding right away, it's going to mess up your day. It's going to mess up your flow. Make sure that you definitely set a established time frame with the customer. And it doesn't have to be like you're talking to the customer, you tell them that established time frame. What I like to do is I will just reply when those like 3 times that I have. So I think 9 in the morning, I look at my emails. I look at my emails at around 1, and then I look at my emails before I get off work, which is around like 6. Obviously, this varies slightly every day, but I try to stick to that schedule. And then when I reply, people are expecting my reply at that time. They get it. They're happy. So that's a consistent feedback for them. So another thing is with the time zones. So we work with customers in California. California is 3 hours, I believe, behind us. Yeah, behind us. So I can kind of take advantage of that because they want their correspondence in the morning. I can do my correspondence then in the afternoon. So around 1 o'clock is around 10 a.m. there. So we do our correspondence that way. It works out for both of us great because then I can do my local correspondences in the morning and I can leave that to a little bit later, and then I can I can work with them a little bit later in the day as well if I need to do anything else with a local business. So take advantage of the time frames, take advantage of the time zones. Try to work like that as you go. So another thing is try to be prompt and consistent. Like I said with the consistency before, having those 3 set times in your communications. So you don't want to leave a communication off for a long time and then respond randomly throughout the day. You want to have that consistency. You want to have your customer know that if they send an email at the end of the day, they'll receive a response sometime in the next day. Sometimes that's not possible, obviously, and usually you can make that clear to the customer saying, hey, I won't be around my desk from this time to this time, maybe with an auto reply, maybe with just like a quick heads up before in your last email. Then they have something to kind of reference that, but try to be consistent. I prefer everyday communications. Some people prefer every other day communications, but like as long as you're consistent and it's prompt enough and the customer is happy with it, then that's kind of what you want to aim for. You want to keep that up and keep going with it. Don't fall behind. Also, be professional and don't use needless slang. So that's like that's standard practice. Don't put yo's in your emails or don't have like random I mean, I've seen it before. I've seen it many times. Try to have like a header, a body and a footer. Try to keep it consistent in that way as well. I try to avoid one-line replies, although it doesn't happen all the time, and that leads me kind of into if you're just starting out, it's a new customer. I always keep it professional. I always keep it very very structured. As soon as I know the customer for maybe even like a couple months or going on to a year, 2 years, and I know how they reply to me, and I know that we're kind of becoming more friendly, and I try to I try to turn my professional relationships maybe not into friendships, but into a more beneficial relationship for the both of us. So we don't only talk about business all the time. Like I will bring up other things in my life. I don't keep it strictly professional with all my customers, and I take it customer by customer, obviously, seeing which one actually wants that relationship, which one doesn't. But I find it beneficial to kind of have that trust back and forth. And then my correspondences become a little more relaxed, and I think the customer does appreciate the fact that they're being treated more than just like a person that we're getting money from, but more as like a friendship colleague kind of situation. So I found that to be pretty beneficial. And then lastly is take responsibility for miscommunication. So this happens, and it's going to happen no matter what. No matter how structured you are, you're going to miss an email, you're going to miss a call. It doesn't matter. Like you might even see the email, and then something gets thrown off in your day and you don't get back to it, and then you get another email from the customer saying, oh, did you not see my email? And then you can say that, yeah, like, listen, I did see your email. I got thrown off by something during the day. It's my bad. I take responsibility for the miscommunication. I'm going to try not to do that again. And I found that people really appreciate it when you take responsibility. Obviously, if you're doing it every day and you're taking responsibility every day, it's not going to help. But if it's a once in a while thing, you take responsibility for it, it's not going to be a big deal for the most part that I found. But as soon as you kind of try to play it off as, no, I didn't see the email, and it happens a couple times, no, I didn't see the email, technology, ha 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 ha. Like that doesn't work anymore. People know how technology works. It's not unless there's an actual serious issue causing emails not to go through, which is a very rare case, and it does happen. But like unless there is, and you are seeing the emails, don't try to play it off like you're not. Take the onus on yourself. Make sure that you don't put it back on the customer either. Like don't be like, oh, it's your fault for emailing me at the end of the day. No, it doesn't work like that. Make sure to take responsibility. So that's those are the do's, and then let's move on to the don'ts. Unless Matt, you have anything to add to the do's while we're here.
Yeah, for that last part is I have two specific stories that I had recently. One of them was a while ago, and the other one was more recently. So we're working on this one site, I'm working on this one site that we're kind of moving kind of fast and loose with it. So we have we're doing like a bunch of stuff very quickly. This customer is very hands-on. So we're moving through things very quickly. And because we're moving through things very quickly, I inevitably every single time will actually miss something, but like to keep that in mind, it's not something that I'm doing necessarily wrong, and the customer is totally fine with it because he's also missing something. So that's one thing that you have to kind of keep in mind is that, it depends on the actual type of communication that you're doing with the person. Like if the guy's sending you, like sometimes it'll be 15 to 20 let's just say updates, and like I missed 2 of them at like almost every time, but it's because like a few of them were conflicting or whatever. Or in this particular case, an incident happened where something went down, and like we had to deal with support for a long time, and then it was like a whole like situation. And then there were multiple meetings about different things in between because of that. Like I was asked, like, hey, did you do that? And I just say, oh, sorry, I completely forgot about that because we were dealing with that incident. So it's like I take responsibility, but it's like he's not pissed. It's like he's pissed off because I'm still clearly dedicated to the project and I'm doing stuff for him. So it's like, don't be super paranoid if you're like sitting on the couch one day and be like, oh my God, I forgot to do this. Like obviously if it's something critical, that's at your discretion. But, assuming your customer is like a normal person and not super strict, obviously it'll be like, oh yeah, of course you forgot because, we were dealing with 18 other things and you did all those things on time or quicker, you delivered them as I said. So of course, like this person's not going to be like, what the heck? But if you didn't deliver on any of those 18 things, that's totally different. I had another incident where emails actually were not coming through. I don't know if Michael will remember this, but I had this one incident where I had just purchased the Galaxy S8 Plus, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go all in on all the Samsung software. Like, I'll just sign in with the Samsung app. I don't care, like, for the email. And what was happening was the Samsung mailing app was flagging one of our customers as spam, whereas on the service itself, I had explicitly marked him as not spam, because what we had instructed this customer to do was specifically message us a whole bunch of times with the content that he wanted up. And then we have like a once a week like content update on his site. And what was happening was it was putting him into a new folder called Spam Box, and it was flagging him in the app as spam because I wasn't opening those apps and I was being messaged repeatedly from him. So I missed like 3 weeks of emails and updates, and that was like a problem. And of course, like that's not good. Like, that's not going to make people happy. But I just explained the situation, and whether the person's happy or not, you just kind of have to go and say like, hey, sorry, I have a new phone. Like legitimately, I have a new phone. It sounds like an excuse, and it is. But it's legit. Like I have a new phone. It was marking things as spam. I'm on it now. I've removed you from the spam box. Like that's all you can do, right? You're not going to make people happy. A bad situation is a bad situation, and sometimes people will advise you to not give excuses and don't give fake excuses. But if it's something that happened, I would just in conversation. They're people too, like we've said. Just say what happened. Oh, this happened here. Sorry, I'm on it. That's a big thing. I'm on it. Or maybe you already did it and be like, oh, sorry, I missed this. This happened, but it's already done. So that's it's just like the work is what speaks for itself. So just a point of note, a couple stories there.
Yeah, exactly. And those are good. Those are good points. And there's always exceptions to rules and stuff like that. So keep a level head, keep it in mind. And like it's going to happen. Like you're going to get a new phone, something's going to go wrong, and you explain it to them. Again, that's not an excuse. I was like, when I was saying excuse, it was more referring to the fact that don't make something up just because, like, don't say that you didn't see the email when you did. It becomes really obvious eventually. So, and I'll move on to the don'ts now with that. So the first one is kind of makes sense to what we were just talking about. So don't neglect answering just because you feel the customer won't like what you have to say. So like when you have bad news, and it's going to happen, sometimes you will have worked on something and maybe your computer deleted it or something like that. I mean, with Windows updates, anything can happen at this point. your entire
as we've discussed.
Yeah, as we've discussed, like you don't know what's going to happen. Your entire folder could be deleted. Your entire document folder could be deleted. So stuff like that will happen, and time will be lost, money will be lost, and you'll feel really bad. Of course, I would hope so. And you won't want to communicate with the customer. You won't want to answer their emails. You won't want to understand, and they'll start like getting worried, and they'll start continuing to communicate with you because they're paying you money, and they'll call you and everything, and they'll get worried. And the longer you leave it, the more worried they're gonna get, the more it's going to bite you back. Like it's going to be worse, much worse. If it happens, my recommendation is immediately either write them an email or give them a call and own up to the situation. Tell them what happened. Yes, some money will be lost. Yes, some time will be lost. Yes, that's negative, but you'll definitely do A, B, and C to fix it. And you'll definitely do that, this, and this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, I'm going to, wipe away this much money and you won't have to pay this. You don't have to do that. Usually when you're upfront and you're upfront with it, you don't like, you just have to fix the issue. Don't say that you're going to give them their money back right away. Like I don't think that's a good response to it. Like depending on the situation. But for instance, I've already told the story, but I had programmed, like developed something in CSS Grid before, and I had been very clear about developing in CSS Grid, and we talked about it, and it was great, and we had a good discussion. But we realized that some of the older iPads didn't support CSS Grid, so I had to go back and spend a bunch more hours developing a way for it to work with Flexbox, and that was a waste of time. Like that was a legit waste of time. Although I learned CSS Grid, I learned it on my customers' time, and they weren't too happy with that. But I owned up right away with it, and they were fine. They were like, okay, mistakes happen. Now we know CSS Grid. We can move on to the future. It wasn't a big deal. If I would have kept it to myself and then charged them for 8 hours of random work, they would have questioned it, because they should question stuff like that. So, and I ended up charging them a little extra over the top because I had to get a new framework developed, but it wasn't anything extreme, and they were okay with it. So again, don't neglect answering a customer just because you think they're going to feel bad or you feel bad or anything like that. Always be upfront and honest. So the next thing is, don't answer customer emails right away. When they come in every time. So again, this is to the point of the first do. Don't be super like on it every single day, because the customer will expect it. The customer will want you to do that in the future, and it'll only bite you in the butt. Like you won't be able to keep it up. There's no way you could always be answering customer emails the second they come in, and it's just not a good way to set up your boundaries with the customer. And then also the last point is don't put yourself in situations where you will be overwhelmed with communication. So if you're taking on, 10 clients at once and they all need heavy communications, that's going to put a stress on everything that you're doing. All the that communication is going to take away from the work that you're going to be doing. So if you're taking on that amount of clients, you might have to pass off some responsibility, maybe hire someone, maybe get outsource some of the work. Like you try to take communication into the factor. Like, yes, I can do 10 sites at once. Yeah, great. But can you communicate efficiently with 10 people at once that constantly want to know updates and stuff like that? That's going to eat majorly into your time to do those sites. So always take communications into account, especially when you're quoting, because that those communications are going to take time. I have a good example of this is when we first started out, I was working with the Russian site, and obviously we're first starting out, so I didn't know much, but that communication the communication that I had to do, it was on a daily basis. It was anywhere between 12 and 1 a.m. Every day. I'm more of a morning person, so that was kind of killing me as well. And it was also in Russian, which Russian is technically my native language, but I moved to Canada when I was 5, so Russian isn't exactly I don't know it that well, so I had to use a lot of Google Translate. I had to write up an email. It took me about maybe 40 minutes just to write up one email about one topic. So it was extremely stressful, and my work during that time definitely suffered because of my communications. So always take into account all the situations when you're quoting, when you're starting projects, when you're taking projects. Communication is definitely a big thing to take into that account. I don't know, any other don'ts that you want to add there, Matt?
I think you basically covered it, because I think like you complimented all the points in the do's for sure.
Yeah.
The only other thing I was going to say is, don't. I'm trying to figure out how to describe this, but don't. I think it comes back to the point where you were saying don't necessarily email them back right away.
Mm-hmm.
And because it kind of creates that pattern of hey, this guy's going to email me back within 5 minutes every time.
Yeah.
I think another way to do it, I don't know whether this would be a do or don't, I think it's more just a point, is one of the things that we will do with our customers is we'll create a very clear procedure as to what's going to happen, and they're used to it. So whether communication happens or not, we were doing multiple updates for a guy on his site without emailing him for about 2 years. So we made a very clear procedure. He was sending us the stuff to put up. We'd put it up. We wouldn't even email him, and that'd be the end of it. And then it got to the point where it was he wanted communication. So you had to be kind of be okay, yeah, I'll do that, no problem. But we created the expectation of, okay, this will be done within, a 7 or 14 day period, and it'll just be done. And that procedure, so no communication can also be good communication, because obviously he's not complaining that it's not done. Mm-hmm. He's also not asking for more to be done. It's just done. So I don't know whether that'd be. I was gonna say it's a don't, but I don't think it is. I think it's more just a point that I thought of because of the do's and don'ts here.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
I think I'll move on to the recurring segment then, web news, social overload. So this should be an interesting one. I'm just going to read through the points as we always do, and then we'll have a discussion. So social media is the vehicle that drives traffic to most online projects, such as HTML, all the things. However, with so many social media networks out there, it can easily become a project itself just to keep up with posting new material, let alone making that actual material. So one of the things that's interesting too is this is sort of being officially recognized because phone manufacturers and other apps are now tracking usage on various apps, letting people know when they're using their phone a lot. You can put little limits and stuff like that on. You can put, you can see how much time you've been watching YouTube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Social media, and especially our mobile devices, have made us almost like an addict in a way. And we're kind of addicted to checking the social media, posting on there, and other apps. And the fact that, it's not just when we're sitting at a desk, the fact that it's everywhere, it kind of adds to that addict factor where, sometimes people will, and I'm guilty of this, you'll sometimes make sure something's framed a certain way in your life so you could take a good Instagram photo. So it's, it's questionable, and, that's weird, I think. It's weird when you say it, but it happens, and it's just part of our lives now. So one of the things that I do want to say, though, is, social media is absolutely necessary. I'm not saying get off of it. I'm not saying that. I think it's useful, and I think it's still good and all that. That's fine. But in terms of a professional working relationship, I guess it would be called, with a social media network, it's what I would say is you should put work into the parts of social media that you want to make work out first. So basically work on your craft, whether in our case we're making designs or making websites or making the podcast, we're doing the web stuff. So make sure that like like for example, we upgraded our audio setup, so we're working on our craft, we're getting it better. I've listened to a few of the very early episodes and they were not as smooth as these ones. So we're getting better, way better, I think, personally. Obviously I'm biased, but we're getting like way better at getting the podcast out, and we're like posting more stuff on social and that type of thing. So for example, we're putting a lot of work into our Instagram account, and we're getting, as a result, more followers and that type of thing out of that. But you can't excel at everything. So obviously we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, but that's more of a content thing. But we're on all these things, and of course you can post on all these things, and we do. Everything's up to date. If you just want to follow us on Twitter, you're not going to miss anything. If you just want to follow us on Facebook, you're not going to miss anything. But our Instagram is more up to date, and it's sort of more community oriented. We share a lot of UI and UX designs on there. So one of the things is that we're putting more work into right now the podcast, which hit a major milestone of over 2,000 downloads now. We also putting more work into the Instagram, which has the most followers of any of our social medias. And so we're putting the work in, and we're getting a result out of it. We're learning new things like, hey, don't post this. Hey, use these hashtags. Hey, post it this time. Hey, this, do that, change this, change that. Talk to these people. Don't talk to these ones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A whole slew of things that we're learning. But like I said, you can't excel at everything. So one of the things that we're doing to sort of fan things out, to sort of get to the point here, one of the things that we're starting to do to sort of fan things out so that we get at least a decent amount of content in each of our social medias is that we're making more content out of a single piece of content so that we're not overloaded. So I'll explain what I mean by that is, so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm sort of learning Adobe XD. I've never used it before. So I'm sort of learning Adobe XD, and I have a couple of little design ideas. Well, because I have a couple of layouts and designs ideas, I have to, wireframe those. I have to maybe draw them really quick, really rough sketches. I have to make the design. I have to make it. And so I'm doing all that stuff anyway, and all of that can be content. So for example, maybe I can get an article out of that for our Medium. Maybe I can get a couple of photos or a photo for Instagram. Maybe I can get an opinion tweet out of it. So maybe I can ask people's opinion on something, or maybe I can say, hey, I tried these 3 apps for wireframing and I didn't like this one, I like this one, etc. And so you're getting, out of that one design, I'm getting, the Adobe XD experience. I'm getting an article. I'm getting a photo or two. I'm getting a tweet. I'm getting, a Facebook post that goes in there, because Facebook's just sort of like where we post things in general. You know what I mean? I almost equate Facebook actually to the email of social media, if that makes any sense. But so that's one of the things I'm saying. And for example, to make our Instagram better, we want to make IGTV content. So maybe I can make an IGTV video out of this. So now out of one thing, I had to make a bunch of content, and so there was more time put into it, but I'm working on my Instagram, I'm making sure my other stuff is up to date, I'm learning more stuff, and I'm getting a whole bunch of things out of it. So it lessens, in our opinion, the overload of, okay, I got to have a unique tweet today, and I got to have a unique Facebook post, and I got to have a unique Instagram picture, and I got to make sure I talk to these people on Instagram today, and then I got to go on IGTV and film this, but I got to do it in selfie cameras, so I got to get this camera. And it's a whole slew of things. If you're doing something, see if you can break it up and see if you can get more pieces out of it. I don't know what you have to add to that, Mike, for social media overload, but as you know, I've been overloaded.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that you're the one that's taking the brunt of it. I do a lot of checking. I do a ton of hey, how's our Instagram doing? How's our podcast doing? I do a lot of checking on it on social media. I'll post every once in a while, and I'll kind of try to link back to us. Because I'm pretty proud of what we've done so far, and thank you everyone for listening. Especially the podcast has really done a lot better than we thought it would, and we're happy about that. We didn't know how well it would do. Obviously, it's my first time podcasting. It's our first technical podcast, I guess, and we're happy with the feedback we're getting. Would love some more. Obviously, let us know if you know of anything we can improve or what you like and stuff like that. But I'm happy with how it's going, but I like the social overload aspect of it. I definitely feel it, even though I'm not even like creating the content. Well, I'm creating the content, but I'm not doing the actual posting. So I don't know how you're dealing with it because like I know you told me that you don't check anymore, like you check once a day or even once every 2 days to see how we're doing, and that's probably a really good way to do it. But I still, whenever I sit down with a coffee, I'll be like, oh, how's our Instagram doing? And it's sometimes like I'm happy, sometimes I'm frustrated, sometimes it's just like whatever, like it's doing, it's there. Like I don't know why I do it, but it's very like instant, right? Like I don't even think about it, and it is, I guess, a social overload for me right now because I was never really into the social media. Like I had an Instagram before, but I would just post like a random picture of a dog or like a nice skyline or something like that. If I wanted to, I never really thought of it as a marketing utility. I never really thought of it as a connection utility to meet other creators and stuff like that, which is interesting. And then the other thing you mentioned was like work on different parts of the social aspect while you're doing content. And I agree with that, and we've wanted to do that ever since the very start. And I even started recording my development sessions. So whenever I started to sit down and started developing anything for Hat specifically, like I wouldn't do this for my clients, but anything for Hat, I would start a recorder with OBS, and I would start recording that video. So if anything happens during my development, I could take a snippet of it and throw it up there. Now, I haven't done that recently, but I will start doing that again because I found it actually kind of really useful, and it almost kept me on track with my development. Like I if I get sidetracked, it's going to be recorded. That's not a great thing. So I found that to be a cool little side aspect of recording yourself while you're doing certain tasks. The other thing is that what I want to do is I don't know how many people have looked at it, but I've made a couple of Vue.js guides, and I'm working on the third one still because like as we're doing the website, I'm learning more Vue.js skills, and I have an interesting thing with a store, like a local store component where you'll be able to like share data between the different components without having to bring in a large Vuex component into it. The Vuex is kind of like what the state management system is for Vue, but it is a little bit expansive and a little bit more complicated to set up. It's not very difficult, but it is more than a regular simple static site would need. So I want to do something that will kind of benefit the people that are just kind of learning Vue and want to use Vue for very limited, very small little sites. I want to have like a very simple to use component in there for that. So what I want to do with that is I want to record, first of all the guides that I've already created. I want to record quick tutorial videos on how to get quickly set up with Vue, on how to create components, styled components, stuff like that with Vue. And I want to post them on YouTube. So then again, I'm creating content for HTML All the Things, and I'm also doing social media content for YouTube. Eventually, we could also take screens and stuff like that and post them on Instagram. So it's like you said, it's kind of like taking everything and putting it, making your time more efficient, because making content every day for the social media is very time consuming. I know you do it for the most part, but even when I have to do some stuff for it, I find like I think too much about it. Even when I'm not doing it, I'm thinking about how to do it, and that kind of disturbs my flow. So I think you're right in the sense where we have to start taking advantage of the content that we're creating for Hat to be able to use that more efficiently for the social medias, if that makes sense.
I think it definitely does too, because it's one of those, it's like you're right, you're really right in the flow aspect. It's because people always say like, don't check your phone too much when you're working, don't check this too much when you're working, maybe mute notifications and just check, have your phone flipped over and then flip it back up, screen up, so you can actually read the things every hour or whatever you're whenever you need to, depending on how urgent your messages typically are. But it's one of those things where I'll be writing something, I'll be like, oh, this could be good for Instagram, but I don't have like this screen recorder set up. So then it's like you go down the rabbit hole of like trying to figure that out. And then it's like, oh, good, now I didn't finish any of this. So like, I wonder if it's almost in a way, in terms of the social media content, because like it's almost like a skill, because one of the things that we're doing, I think, rather effectively on Instagram is, we are sharing a lot of UI and UX experiences on there. And I think like we're getting a bunch of likes and we are getting followers. And I think people are enjoying that. And obviously we're giving exposure to, a network of people, and, they, do in kind. They'll sometimes post about us in their stories and that type of thing. And that's really great. And so it's, it's exposure for exposure. And that's exactly what social media is supposed to be. But I think one of the problems is that like those guys are oftentimes, and I'm assuming to an extent, but those guys are oftentimes the UI guy, and they are fully set up with the UI experience. So they already have like a Photoshop template, where what they do is they go into their design program. Let's say it's Sketch. They get their sketch done. They'll take like a snapshot or whatever. They'll dump it in the Photoshop template to make sure that it's the right aspect ratio and that type of thing. They'll export and post it. And like they're so ready, but that in itself is a skill, right? Like I'm assuming that's what they do, because a lot of those guys do like a daily design. So what I'm thinking is like, we're doing a lot all at the same time, and I'm thinking that maybe it's just like a skill like anything else, where we've kind of gotten the skill at, okay, let's get like a little network of people, let's get some tags going, let's start cross sharing, let's build up the following. But then at the same time, it's like, okay, we're sharing each other's content, but what about our content? So then it's like, okay, well, now I've spent all this time talking to these people and doing all this. Now I need to make content, but I have never thought of that, and I need it now. So then now you start thinking about that more. So I think it might be one of those things where as we go through it, we might get faster at it. Like right now, I know kind of, I'll be like, flipping through Instagram, be like, oh, this person has cool designs, I'm going to message them. Whereas before, I'd be like, do I message them? Do I comment on their stuff for a bit and then I message them? There was a thought process. Now I have like a procedure. Oh, I like this person's stuff. I think it's really cool. I want to share it on my page. I'm going to go share it on my page with their permission. I'm going to ask them, and then I'm going to post it up, and then that's it. You know what I mean? Like that's done. So I think that, and this almost sounds shallow for some reason, but like framing our work life in a light that social media would enjoy, like in a presentation fashion, is something that I think we might get used to. Like you were saying with the coding, like live, like one of the things what I was thinking of doing was doing, I'll just announce it. So like quite literally, one of the things that we were talking about this week was we were talking about having so like, let's say I'm trying to learn Adobe XD, as I said, and let's say I want to make a lemonade stand website. I want to make that design. So what I do is I do like a bit of research to see what other lemonade stand people do. And I'm making a generic one, so I'm not looking up specific market conditions, but just as a general point. I go around and I look at, what do lemonade stand websites need? What do they have on there? What's the graphics? What's this? What's that? What's this? So there's my market research. That's content in itself. Then I can go and make it onto Adobe XD. That's content in itself. I can write about the market research and the experience. That's content. Then I could possibly have a video of it. That's content. Like, you know what I mean? So there's all this. But every step of that, I'm stopping and thinking, how do I frame this? I think that will go away. And I think that could be live streamable. There's another idea. But that would be a whole other thought process. Like you were mentioning Twitch. Or OBS or something. I don't remember what you were mentioning. Was it OBS or Twitch?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned OBS, but it leads into the fact that I could start streaming on Twitch through OBS. With like, if I want to stream a live, development session, I could technically do that right now.
Right. So like, and right now, and I'm assuming again, but like right now, I assume that you would need to think about it like a lot in order to plan it, do it, make sure it's done right, test the audio, test the stream, whatever, right? You would have to do that. Whereas if you do it, like let's say you did it next week, and then you do it the week after, then you do it the week after, that like third or fourth week, it's going to be like, okay, guys, we're going to go. There's no sit down and prep time. It's just click. Yeah. So I think that maybe, and this is like, and it's overload again, but maybe using social media more from my personal side will help me get better at it professionally as well. Just using social media more in general. That's almost like the polar opposite of overload, where I'm dumping more on, but it's like I need to do marketing.
Gasoline on the fire, yeah.
Just dumping gasoline on the fire, but it's like we need to do this marketing. Like it needs to be done, right? Because like, I mean, people that are listening to this now, maybe if you're new here, welcome. But if you're a recurring person, you've hit the subscribe button. And maybe you're checking us out on Instagram or Twitter, and we appreciate that, but like realistically, you don't even need that social media to keep up with us. But how does the guy who doesn't know who we are find us? He's not going to just randomly be searching the net and find HTML, all the things. He's going to be like, oh, I need to be found. So we need to constantly do these like shout outs, almost like, hey guys, we're here on social media. And then eventually through hashtags and the algorithm and every other thing, we get found by certain people, we get reshared or whatever. And then people start following us. And that's how and this is for most online businesses, this is how you get more customers, more buyers, more whatever. And this is how you make connections in the industry too. It's like, you can make industry, connections across the world with social media. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where, yeah, like being overloaded to an extent, but I'm posting more than ever, and I'm not putting as much work as I did when just posting once or twice a day. It's like, let's say it took me an hour. I'm totally ballparking. I have no idea. But like, let's say it took me an hour to make 2 posts because I had to think about it, find the app, find the graphic, do this, do that, do that. Now I like kind of just have a procedure. So I think that you're right in that, if you keep messing around with that OBS without going live, then you don't have to think about that part. Then you can start putting work into the Twitch part.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it's about putting the work in. So I don't know if this is really a conclusive web news, because like I think we're still questioning it.
Well, I think we're going to keep questioning it until, I don't even think there is an until, because everything is evolving. So all these social media sites have algorithms. The algorithms keep changing. You have to evolve with those algorithms changing. You don't even know what's changing. So you have to kind of like try different things all the time. So that's A. And B, I don't see a point where we're going to be like, I'm satisfied with our growth. You know what I mean? Like right now we're like, obviously we're growing. Are we satisfied? No, we want to grow faster. So I think that's going to keep happening. Like we're going to be growing and we're going to be like, oh wow, we're growing great, but how do we grow faster? So I think that with social media and with this kind of stuff, there is no defined set limit of, okay, I'm good now. I think you have to keep evolving, otherwise you're going to get left in the dust, which is like slightly unfortunate, but I think it's the only way to make it fair. Otherwise, people will just take advantage of it, and there will only be like 3 creators, and that's it. Because people will just find the ways, and the people that did it first, that's it. They win. This gives it a little bit more of a challenge for everyone, because at least there's a chance for the newer creators to come in and start being discovered. So I like that about it, and then I also don't like it because, again, you're overloaded. You have to constantly be updating. You have to constantly think about it. Like, I'm going to Toronto today. Should I take a picture and post it on Instagram? Like that is actually a thought that I've had today. It's a weird thought.
And the answer is yes, because you should tag it in the story.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like it's going to happen, and but like again, it's taken over my thought, and it probably sidetracked me at some point during the day. So I think we have to get better at posting. I think we have to get better at also not getting disturbed with the flow. And I think, like you said, I think as we become better with posting, it's not going to be an issue for us to get disturbed, because there's going to be an automatic thing. We're going to be like, oh yeah, this is how you do it, because we already have all the apps set up, everything's set up, all the templates are there and stuff like that. So I think that's the conclusion that I want to make in this web news, at least, is we'll just keep evolving and let you know how it goes. We want to give, like, we'll have another social overload episode, maybe like, in a year from now or 6 months from now, where we give an update on how it's going, what we did wrong before and stuff like that. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also like to note too that if you're one of those people that don't want to enter an overload like thing, I mean, one of the things that an overload state, I guess is the right word, but one of the things that a lot of entrepreneur, I guess they'd be how-toers, or I don't really know how you describe it. It's like the business help guys online. You see tons of them. A lot of them will say be everywhere, and that's right. But if it's not going to work for you, and it's totally up to your discretion, but if it's not going to work for you, maybe start with one. Maybe claim all your usernames or something, to make sure you have them, but then across all the services, but then maybe just post on Twitter. And if you just post on Twitter for a year and you end up getting a huge following, then you're posting on Twitter for a year and you get a huge following. We have a customer that only does Twitter. We have I know a couple people that only do Twitter, and they're totally successful. They're totally fine. It's not a big problem. They don't have to deal with, they have to deal with one algorithm, essentially one algorithm, which is Twitter's, one set of, like image dimensions to remember, which is Twitter. They don't have to deal with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the cards, the cards that are on tweets, whether the previews are going to work on their links on Facebook. Like, I mean, for us, I think it's kind of critical that we're in all of them because our content is so vast. Like, our content is very different. Like, we do a lot of podcasting, but then once we get into it, we're going to do more templates, we're going to do more technical stuff, we're going to do more writing, so we kind of have to be everywhere. But if you're a person that like just sells things on Etsy, Etsy's almost a social in itself in a way. Like, it's, you're on a discovery network, and now you can maybe go to Twitter and just take to Twitter first and see what happens, and then I'll add Instagram. I think maybe Instagram's better for me. Maybe you'll switch, maybe you won't. And we actually have a customer where he has said on Facebook, please find us on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And people have liked his page a lot on Facebook, and then they've just moved over to Twitter. And they moved over to Twitter, and that may work for your situation. It may not. It's totally up to your market and your thing. But I think overload is inevitable. But I think that it's almost I think you maybe mentioned it, Mike. I think it's almost an efficiency thing.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be efficient, and you have to be good at it.
Yeah.
I think that really concludes that, because I think we're just going to keep talking in circles and until we kind of evolve ourselves. Unless you have anything else to add there, Mike.
Nope. I think we're good.
Alrighty. Well, I'm going to run the conclusion then. So thank you for listening, and make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on the platform of your choice. You can follow us on the socials via at HTML All the Things on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us via at HTML Everything on Twitter. We're on Medium. We're on GitHub. We just recently got onto Stitcher as well, so if you're on that app, go check that out. You can also find us on the Spotify as per the usual. You can also find us on Patreon if you want to support the show. You can go to patreon.com/HTML All the Things and give that a go. Check out the tiers, see which rewards you'd like or which ones you wouldn't like, and go give that a go and let us know. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform you're listening to this on, and we are signing off.